So guess what? I found another way to combine my specialties of sex and death: autoerotic fatalities, or unintentional deaths that occur during sole fun time when a prop or device goes wrong. Yes, it is rare, but very interesting from a psychological and police investigation standpoint. Before we begin, we post death and dying related videos every Friday, so if that sounds like your kind of thing, consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's talk autoerotic fatalities. Warning, this video contains information about accidental deaths of a sexual nature for the purposes of education only. Do not try these activities. Autoerotic deaths are defined as accidental deaths that occur during individual solitary sexual activity in which some type of apparatus that was being used to enhance the sexual stimulation of the deceased caused unintentional death. I must stress the unintentional part. These people were not suicidal, not looking to die. They were simply getting a high and it went wrong. I must also stress that these activities are completely solo, no partner involved. Now, we don't have stats about how many people indulge in autoerotic activities under that definition, but the number would certainly be quite high depending on how you define it. But that number is not of importance to us, as we're a death-related channel, and luckily we do have some stats on when it goes wrong. So the USA has around 2 to 4 cases per million people per year, with the majority being young males aged 15 to 25 years old. In Scandinavia, it's estimated at 1 to 2 cases per million people each year. Also, the most common category are young males 15 to 25. In Australia, it's a bit different, with only 0.3 cases per million people each year that died, and the majority of those were 30 to 39-year-old males. I wasn't able to find any stats on many other countries, unfortunately. Now, most of you have probably heard the term autoerotic asphyxiation somewhere on TV. If you're an Aussie and you lived through the 90s, you've definitely heard of that term. If you know, you know. Yes, this is the same activity, just when it's a fatality, it's obviously gone wrong. But autoerotic activities are not limited to asphyxia, although there is a good reason for the stereotype of a young cross-dressing male found hanging in the closet surrounded by pornography, and asphyxia usually does account for between 70 to 80% of autoerotic deaths. However, other activities could include electrocution, foreign body insertion, body wrapping, pressing, self-immersion, self-immolation, or various things to do with various gases. As you can imagine, some of these are more likely to be enjoyed than others, and certain ones have more risk of going wrong than others. It probably goes without saying that people who indulge in these activities aren't really open about it to friends and family. It's usually hidden, including any marks that it may leave. So when a death occurs due to these activities, investigation can be complicated, and that's going to impact the coroner's ruling on cause of death. Sometimes it's quite obvious that's an autoerotic death. Perhaps there's pornographic material out next to the body. Perhaps they are dressed in bondage or kink gear. But other markers that you may expect to be there often aren't. For instance, evidence of self-pleasure at these deaths is actually rare. And while yes, the kink community does strongly recommend that those indulging in these acts have strong escape mechanisms, the cases where it has gone wrong rarely have one at the scene, implying a she'll be right kind of attitude, even though in these activities one slip could be deadly. So cause of death is often not as straightforward as you may think. Police can't really ask the family, hey, was your son into something kinky? Because they're likely to have no idea. Also, who really talks about their sex life with their family in general? Luckily nowadays, police often have access to the deceased's internet history, which can make things a lot easier. For the coroner, however, explaining this cause of death to families seems to rarely go well. One coroner in the US said, "Families do not like to hear that their son or daughter committed suicide, but a death caused by autoerotic pursuit often leads parents to deny this fact and rather attempt to believe it was suicide. There is something more socially acceptable about that. It is easier to comprehend and explain intentional death to other mourners." The coroner's job is also not helped by the bias of the officers conducting the investigation, who may have similar thoughts. Though in their defense, someone deliberately opting out of life is statistically much higher than an accidental death by autoerotic activity. So it makes sense that they would assume suicide, especially when there are no other markers indicating otherwise. Which means the stats could be a lot lower than they actually are. A fetish or kink is only considered a problem when it starts to impact one or more main parts of your life. That is to say, those who indulge in these activities are not sick, there's nothing wrong with them, unless it starts to impact negatively on one or more parts of their life. But, like any activity, you need to put things in place to mitigate risk, especially if it is a solo activity. So have fun, but do it safely. And with that, go talk death.